A glorious day, ladies and gentlemen, especially to our instructor, Dr. Heidi. Good day, ma'am. Today, we, the Group 7, are tasked to discuss and further elaborate various topics in environmental management subject. But before heading to our proper discussion, let me introduce to you first the Group 7 members, starting with Justoni Sharot, Mia Jean Serrano, Ann Grace Rosel, yours truly Sheena Hyra Roylan, Erica Sandingay, and last but not the least, Ira Nicole Sordilia. And these are the topics to be discussed: ecosystem, types of ecosystem, ecosystem under threat, deforestation, managing forest, measuring and managing biodiversity.
Good day everyone, I am Justini C. Sharot and I am one of the reporters of the Group 7. So the topic that I'm going to discuss is all about the ecosystem. So what is the ecosystem? So an ecosystem is a structural and functional unit of ecology where the living organisms interact with each other and the surrounding environment. So in other words, an ecosystem is a chain of interactions between organisms and their environment. So the ecosystem is where living and non-living things interact with each other. So in this ecosystem, living things need the non-living things and other living things to survive. So even us being in our respective community is us being a part of the ecosystem. So we are indeed a part of the ecosystem as we are living things that depends our life and the non-living things in other living things as a source of food, water, shelter, clothing, and etc. So to make it more comprehensive, let's explore the structure of the ecosystem. So there are two components of an ecosystem. So we have the biotic components and the abiotic components. So first is the biotic components. So what is the biotic components? So this refers to all the living components in an ecosystem. It includes the humans, plants, animals, and microorganisms. So biotic components are those who have lives, so those who possess lives. So therefore, as humans, we classify ourselves as the biotic components. Moreover, there are types of biotic components as food chain, food web, and food pyramid is present in the ecosystem. It is best for us to know the different classification of biotic components according to their purpose and functions. So first one is the producers. So this includes the autotrophs such as plants. So they are called autotrophs as they can produce food through the process of photosynthesis. So most of these are plants that produce fruits and vegetables or anything that is for consumptions. Next one are those who consume what the producers produce are so-called consumers. So they are called heterotrophs as they are organisms that depend on other organisms for food. So these are mostly animals that consumes plants and animals. So consumers who eat plants are called herbivores. Consumers who eat animals are called carnivores, and the consumers who eat both plants and animals are called omnivores. So last one is the decomposers. So this includes saprophytes such as fungi and bacteria. So they directly thrive on the dead and decaying organic matter. So decomposers are essential for the ecosystem as they help in recycling nutrients to be reused by plants. So the next components of the ecosystem is the abiotic components. So abiotic components are the non-living component of an ecosystem. So it includes air, water, soil, minerals, sunlight, temperature, nutrients, wind, and etc. So abiotic or the non-living things are those who lacks the characteristic of life. So they do not possess life, but they are important for the living things to survive as they help the living things to develop and to live easier with comfort. So I think that would be the end of my part. The next reporter will continue the discussion.
Hello, good day. My name is Ann Grace Rosel, and for today's video, I am going to discuss the types of ecosystems. An ecosystem can be as small as an oasis in a desert or as big as an ocean spanning thousands of miles. So we have two types of ecosystems. The first one is the terrestrial ecosystem, and the second one is the aquatic ecosystem. Terrestrial ecosystems are exclusively land-based ecosystems. There are different types of terrestrial ecosystems distributed around various geographical zones. So the first one is called as the forest ecosystem, the grassland ecosystem, tundra ecosystem, and the last one is the desert ecosystem. So forest ecosystem consists of several plants, particularly trees, animals, and microorganisms that live in a coordination with the abiotic factors of the environment. Forests help in maintaining the temperature of the earth and are the major carbon sink. So the grassland ecosystem. The vegetation is dominated by grasses and herbs. And the tundra ecosystems are devoid of trees and are found in cold climates. Last type of a terrestrial ecosystem is the desert ecosystem. Desert ecosystems are found throughout the world. These are regions with little rainfall and scarce vegetation. The days are hot and the nights are cold. Proceed to the second type of an ecosystem, and it is called as aquatic ecosystem. So aquatic ecosystems are ecosystems present in a body of water. This can be further divided into two types, namely freshwater ecosystems and marine ecosystem. The freshwater ecosystem is an aquatic ecosystem that includes lakes, ponds, rivers, streams, and wetlands. These have no salt content in contrast with the marine ecosystem. So, marine ecosystem. The marine ecosystem includes seas and oceans. These have a more substantial salt content and greater biodiversity in comparison to the freshwater ecosystem.
Let's proceed to our next topic, ecosystem under threat. When we say ecosystem, it is the interconnectedness of organisms including animals, plants, and other living and non-living things. Ecosystem under threat. What are the threats of ecosystem? The threats of ecosystem are the direct exploitation of natural resources, climate change, pollution, and invasive species. These are the threats that can change in land and sea use. According to terrestrial and freshwater ecosystem, land use has a largest negative impact on our nature. Example of land use is mining. Mining is the process of industry of obtaining coal or other minerals below the surface of the ground and water. Mining has a negative impact to our nature. It causes floods and landslides. Let's proceed to the threats of ecosystem. So the first threats of ecosystem is overexploitation and unsustainable use. In this part, the unsustainable use of natural resources and overexploitation, which is it occurs in terms of harvesting, exceeding reproduction of wild plant and animal species. So the example of over-exploitation activities and unsustainable use of natural resources is like hunting, overfishing, overmining, and excessive logging. So these threats is continued to be the major threats of ecosystem. The next threat is climate change. So climate change remain as a threat of ecosystem. The effect of climate change is so rapid in plants and animals. Both plants and animals are sensitive to changes in climate. The species can take hundreds of years to fully adapt to the natural course of events. So that is the second threats of ecosystem. So the next threats of ecosystem is increased pollution. So increased pollution of environment. So like air pollution, land pollution, water pollution, and soil pollution. So this pollution of environment simply destroy the health of crucial ecosystems. As a result of natural causes, pollution potentially releases noxious substances and destructive chemicals into the environment. The fourth threats of ecosystem is the invasive species. So invasive species often compete for food with the native species and can also alter the habitat. This gradually destroys the ecosystem and leads to the extinction of species. So these are the threats can affect the ecosystem, but the main major threats and the leading threats of ecosystem are the global warming and the climate change. So climate change and global warming are the leading threats to the ecosystem. Climate change and global warming directly impact to the abiotic factors essential for sustaining the biotic elements. The global temperatures is destroying and altering the coral reefs, mountain regions, water corals, this is the vital ecosystem.
Good morning, Mom. Good morning, classmates. My topic is all about deforestation. Deforestation is the purposeful clearing of forest land. Throughout history and into modern times, forests have been raised to make space for agriculture and animal grazing, and to obtain wood for fuel, manufacturing, and construction. What causes deforestation? Direct cause of deforestation are agriculture expansion, wood extraction, and infrastructure expansion such as road building and urbanization. What is the advantage and disadvantage of deforestation? One of the advantages of deforestation is that deforestation creates income-earning opportunities, while the disadvantage of deforestation is that it will cause climate change, soil erosion, flooding, and a host of problems for indigenous people. How can we help to avoid deforestation? To avoid deforestation, we can plant trees or encourage our families and friends to join tree planting activities or any activities that would help our forest land.
So now let us proceed to managing forest. Forest management is a process of planning and implementing practices for the stewardship and use of forest to meet specific environmental, economic, social, and cultural objectives. So if we will be going to ask ourselves, why do we need to manage our forest properly? Or why does forest management is important? So here is the answer. In all honesty, our forest technically wouldn't need our management if it weren't for our own reliance on forest as a resource. Forests have covered this earth for hundreds of millions of years, long before humans even existed. Back then, forests were able to manage themselves. The trees grew and provided resources like oxygen, shelter, food, and more to the animals that live in their forest. It is indeed clear nga managing forest is important not just because of the resources that we can get in it, just like the oxygen, the food, and the shelter that we need in our everyday life, but also for the animals that live in there and needs the forest. And most especially, in order for the future generations to be able to utilize the resources that we have today.
So measuring and managing biodiversity. But before we will go further, let us know first what is biodiversity. So biodiversity, it is a scientific term for the variety of life on Earth. It refers not just on species but also to the ecosystems and differences in genes within a single species. So having unhealthy ecosystems, it cleanses our water, it purifies our air, maintain our soil, and regulate the climate and provide us with food. So in measuring biodiversity, it can be measured in many different ways depending on the species of animals. We have here 4 main methods of measuring biodiversity. So we have here the canopy fogging, the quadrant sampling, the transect sampling, and netting. So this canopy fogging, it is mainly used when collecting data about the biodiversity of insects. So insects are sprayed with a small dose of insecticide on top of a tree and fall into a large screen below. And this method allows the scientists to observe and collect data about the life cycle of these insects. So next is the quadrant sampling. So it is the method where a large cubic area is made by using a pre-made square made out of plastic and string. So the different species and their numbers within the quadrant are counted. And this is repeated many times in different places of the habitat to get an accurate representation of biodiversity. So the next is the transect sampling. So it is conducted by using a transect line. So a transect line is usually a rope or measuring tape that had been marked at a set measurement such as every meter. So the line is unrolled throughout the habitat. At every interval, the type of number of species along the line is recorded. So the last one is netting. So it is a method that involves fine mesh nets in terrestrial ecosystem. So it is also used to capture fish and other organisms that live in aquatic ecosystems. So once the organism is captured, it is identified. It can also be captured. So the blood might be taken for genetic analysis and it could be tagged. So now question, how we can manage biodiversity sustainably? So in order to use biodiversity sustainably, one must consume natural resources at a rate that allows the planet to replenish them. So it's a strategy to guarantee that we will be able to meet the demands of both the present and the coming generations. So since we use the resources more and more, so the pressure on ecosystems grows along with the human populations.
So that concludes the report of Group 7. We are hoping that we had instilled something into your minds. Thank you for listening and God bless us all.